Hey everyone, Chris Nixon with IoT Monitor. Excited to have Kyle and Kayla and Kirill. I think on the last podcast, Kirill, I introduced our guests and then just left you to the side. So I won't do that again today. So I apologize for that in advance, or I guess in real time. But excited
you're not
to
the
have,
first, you're not the last.
Yeah, no, for sure. Excited to have Kyle and Kayla on from Rango today. Hey everyone, how are you guys doing?
Good. How are you?
Well, why don't we take a second and maybe introduce yourselves to our audience, and we'll start there.
So I'm a network engineer and the network operations manager for Rango Broadband, which is based out of Nevada, Washington, and Colorado. I've been in the WISP industry for almost 8 years and have worked in several different companies from California to Southern Idaho to Illinois, now back over in the West Coast with Nevada and Washington.
Very cool. And you didn't tell me, I didn't know, because I live outside of Denver. I don't know what part of Colorado you're in. Maybe I didn't know you guys were in. Is that new market for you?
Yeah, that's the company there is for Morrison, just outside Morrison.
Okay. Yeah.
So right before you hit the going deep into the Rockies on 70.
Yeah. Very cool. Kayla, what about yourself?
Same thing, network operations engineer. This is the second WISP I've worked for. I actually met Kyle at the same Southern Idaho company that we both worked for.
Mm-hmm.
Let's see, I've been in this industry for 5 or 6 years.
Very cool.
Maybe.
And I think,
you know what?
Really?
Yeah.
Go ahead.
I was just going to say that, I talked to a lot of networking guys and a lot of network engineers over my time. Kyle and Kayla are some of the sharpest network engineers I've had a chance to communicate with. So I don't know, it's got to be the industry, right? You really need to know your stuff to make sure that environment's up and running at an optimal performance. So it's very, very cool to have you guys on. Did you have a question for me, Chris?
No, maybe. I've since forgotten it, so that's okay. Why don't we do this? Why don't we dig in? And thank you for introducing yourselves. And Kirill, I think by now we've done a couple of episodes, so we'll. I think the audience will know you by now. But Kirill, why don't you maybe introduce the topics that we're going to talk about today? If you have them handy, I have them handy. But if you have them handy, why don't you do that?
Yes. So we definitely want to talk about the prevalence of 6 gigahertz, right? This idea of introducing new spectrum in the space, and the challenges of deploying 6 gigahertz radio. Because I, from what I remember, from what I know, it's a complete overhaul of hardware. Then we're going to go and talk about Starlink and how Starlink affects WISP industry and what effects it has in general on broadband. And we're also going to talk about the prevalence of 4G, 5G in larger internet service providers like T-Mobile. So those are going to be our 3 main topics. So I'm very, very excited.
Yeah, and I think then just the last one, I was looking at our notes as we prepped for this. Kyle, you had mentioned the growing need for tools to limit truck rolls and the importance of that. Either tower sites, customer sites, etc. So we'll make sure to touch on that. But why don't we start with the 6 gigahertz stuff? Kyle, you want to jump in?
Yeah, so with the FCC opening up 6 gigahertz to the fixed wireless industry, or even just wireless in general, has really been a game changer, where we still need to be cognizant of the incumbents of licensed 6 gigahertz. So what the FCC has done was they mimicked CBRS, which was the 3 gigahertz offering they did auctions after, basically during COVID, which was to allow industry, or the providers to auction for spectrum, and then that was their spectrum inside that 3 gigahertz. They couldn't really do that with 6 gigahertz because of the amount of spectrum that's out there. So what they've done was basically forced every device that's in 6 gigahertz for outdoor use, such as access points or customer premise equipment, CPEs, radios on the house, to have GPS pucks in order to ensure that those devices are not stepping on the incumbents and hurting licensed uh, backhauls, such as for railroad industry, telecom, for long distance emergency services use 6 gigahertz as well because it's pretty wide open. So they just want to make sure that no one's stepping on it, and basically they want to make sure that we don't have the same issues as 5 gigahertz. If people go look at their home router, you'll see so many things in 5 gigahertz, and you get interference, and that's what causes issues, latency issues, speed issues. So they're trying to limit that.
Now, was the need to go to a 6 gigahertz mainly for the fact that we've overexhausted frequencies at this point and things are just saturated, or was it the fact that we can now go into like 160 megahertz channels where things are, you can get speeds up to like 2.4 gigahertz. I don't know if you will ever get 2.4 gigahertz out of 6 gigahertz bands, but it's possible. What are the reasons for this push? Can you give us an idea?
Yeah, so with 5 gigahertz specifically, I actually spent a year and a half on nights. That's what I did. Every night I ran frequency scans because all the companies are running on top of each other, which then causes overlap for your customers, causing speed issues or latency issues, what have you. I mean, in that year and a half, I figured I ran right around 10,000 scans.
Wow. Holy cow. So
5 gigahertz.
what about like DFS? Were you guys running DFS where you're all of a sudden, because I would imagine that would help, right? Or no?
So the issue you get with DFS is places like airports. If you're running in their spectrum and they need it, they get it. There's no ifs, ands, or buts. So at that company, it was jammed in my head. Do not use DFS unless it's new equipment. New equipment, you can kind of work around that because your output power does degrade with DFS. It has to be set, 5? Yeah, it
your
goes
EIRP
down.
needs to be 30.
Yeah, so that makes a big difference on older equipment. So the 6 gigahertz has kind of mitigated some of that.
Understood. Now,
and COVID really pushed the change because at the beginning of COVID, the FCC released the upper 5.8 gigahertz spectrum, which was another 45 megahertz, because they knew more people were going to be working from home. So you had to apply for a special transmit authority from the FCC to be able to use that frequency, which you then had to take that grant to the manufacturers such as Cambium, Mimosa, Ubiquity, and say, here, this is our grant. We want to use the spectrum, and you get special firmware to be able to unlock those frequencies.
And that was allowed on the 5 gigahertz radios, right?
Yeah.
So with the prevalence of 6 gigahertz, you almost have to do a full rip and replace, and not just of the radios, right? But you also have to think about like if these things are powered over PoE, especially APs. I'm not even talking about point-to-point wireless, but especially access points. There's some serious considerations like advanced PoE capabilities that you guys are going to require on the switches. From what I remember, with point-to-point wireless, it doesn't really matter because you're using injectors, right? But with access points, this is where things become tricky.
Yeah, we 90% of our stuff is all in PoE switches, such as Natonix or MikroTik.
Okay.
Not
MikroTik
many are
switcher.
running over standard. Yeah, not many are running over the standard PoE injectors because we need the ability to reboot them, especially access points. We need the ability to
Got it.
reboot them. Point to points, they're essentially either in the switch for PoE, depending on which type it is, or it's over a DC injector. Sure, for straight.
You mind if I ask a question that's outside the 5 gigahertz, 6 gigahertz topic, just really quick? So, are you guys installing access points at customer sites so that you're basically controlling the way that their devices or edge devices connect to the internet, or are you having your customers put some sort of a router up to your point-to-point wireless, radio, or both?
Yeah, no. The customer side is they have their own router, or we supply our own gateway that plugs into their radio, which connects back to the access point.
Okay, makes sense.
Yeah,
got it. So are you currently in the stages of upgrading your radios from 5 gigahertz to 6 gigahertz, and what is that looking like? Are you guys doing that across backhauls in the beginning, and then then going further to the edge of customer premise?
So the main focus has been on the customer side, putting up new access points and converting customers, starting with the ones that had the higher speed packages on our 5 gigahertz stuff, and offering them upgrades to 200 to 400 megs. Wow. over 6 gigahertz, and we've made sure, Kayla and I have been doing this a long time. We've really noticed where some sweet spots are for ensuring the minimum information rate. So we run Cambium 6 gigahertz, so we make sure that the installers know, hey, if your signal noise ratio is X, we can guarantee 100 by 20. If it's below that, please don't install it, because the new broadband, the new FCC requirements for broadband is 100 by 20. That's the new definition. Whereas just last year it was 25 by 5. So they've really stepped it up. It's now 100 by 20. So we want to make sure that we're in that compliance.
Are you using 160? Oh, go ahead, Kayla. I'm sorry.
Yeah. So I know up in my area in Washington, we have a couple of towers that are sitting with 20 plus APs. And so we've been hanging the 6 gigahertz up on those to move the customers from the 5 gig to the 6 gig. But unfortunately, with the Cambium gear, you only get, 4-ish miles?
Yeah.
If you're lucky.
Okay.
And that's because of the power limitations.
Yeah. But that's how we've at least been trying to do most of our bigger upgrades, is just on the bigger towers that we have 200 plus customers on.
Got it. So there's distance limitations, right, between the 5 gigahertz and the 6 gigahertz. So you guys almost have to do hops at a certain point in time, or no?
That is the plan in the future, is to, because these big ones right now, we're using Cambium's full EPMP 4600, which is their 4x4 MIMO. That's one we're going to be able to load customers up on. Smaller sites, we'll be using the 4600Ls, which is a 2x2 MIMO. Throw a nice little horn on there and pick up 20 customers and call that one a day, and then add as needed.
Gotcha. Awesome. So for these 20 APs, which is insane, I don't think I've ever seen a 20 AP solution. It's crazy. What kind of channels are you leveraging? Are you leveraging the 160 megahertz channels in solutions like this, or what?
It's 20 megahertz.
Come on. So that one, the 20 APs, that's all 5 gigahertz.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's
Oh,
actually
okay.
Yeah.
on that site, 25,
Uh,
26 APs.
something like that. But I've
So what kind
seen
of data rates are
other.
you seeing?
we're getting there.
Okay.
It's a
But
touchy subject.
yeah, it is. But I have seen other towers. So at every 30 degrees, you have an AP, and I've seen 2.5 rings or 2
Yeah,
rings.
I know 2 rings for sure.
Yeah,
So for 30 degrees, a full ring is 12 access points, meaning two rings is 24 access points, and everything's offset by 15 degrees.
Pretty impressive.
but
Impressive guy.
That was very
Yeah.
well built from the former company that we both worked at in Southern Idaho.
it took a lot of finagling, and after it was done, I said, I'm not touching this again, because in order to fix one piece of equipment, you have to move 4 minimum.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And 5 customers, I hate saying it, but 4 customers compared to 50, move them somewhere
Yeah.
else.
Got it.
Yeah,
So
for our
how's
6 gigahertz, we're not really using the 160 megahertz
Yeah.
because we don't. There's no real need for us to use the 160 megahertz because most customer routers are a gigabit link, and we don't sell gigabit on standard residential at this point. And we don't really want to blow out the spectrum. We don't want to cause the same problems that we've seen with the 5 gigahertz, where everyone just
good
went to
point.
40 megahertz and you only have 3 or 4 non-overlapping channels.
Yeah.
Plus, from testing, 80 megahertz seems like a really good sweet spot anyways. You get the distance plus the speeds. Because you're only getting
Really
2 miles, if that.
Yeah.
So really switching over from 5 gigahertz to 6 gigahertz, what your concern is isn't necessarily the fact that you have these very, very large channels that give you like significant throughput capabilities. It's really to free up some of the
Yep.
frequencies that you guys are leveraging. And of course, it's challenging, right? So now, if you're going to 6 gigahertz frequencies, you may need hops in certain areas, and then you also may need to upgrade certain equipment, not just the access points themselves, but also the switch infrastructure as well to handle PoE capabilities to support it, right? So now you're going from your typical 15.4 watts per port to maybe 30 watts or 60 watts or even 100 watts in certain cases.
Yeah.
So
Luckily, most everything we run, the Cambium doesn't really hit that hard. I think the max I've seen is up almost 30 watts.
30 watts. That's pretty cool. Awesome.
Yeah,
So
we're
that's
excited about the 6 gig. In the last 7-8 months, we've converted probably I think a combined almost 400 customers
wow.
between Washington and Nevada. We don't. Colorado is part of our company, but we don't really deal with it. He runs his own ship. He runs it.
Okay. Got it. And what percentage, and I assume, are you at some point transitioning all of your customers over? Or is it still,
Probably not all the way over to 6 gig because
okay.
some are just they're just out there. And but the plan is to convert as many as we can, have the abilities to as many 5 gig as we can kill, we will. Just so we can ensure that the customers that are still going to be on the 5 gigahertz have the best experience they can.
Yeah, because at least
No, that makes sense.
you cut a tower in half, so those 20 APs get it back down to 10. Put 10 customers, get it probably in 40. You can push those speeds out for them and still get some distance.
What's the furthest link that you guys have currently? I'm just curious.
Is that the
I think
AF11?
I think the furthest point to multi-point customer we have is probably 13 miles. The longest one I know of from the companies I've worked for was 22.
That's
That was a very long shot, and that's over Lake of the Ozarks here in Missouri. So
wow.
that was my former company.
So Chris, just to give you a perspective, a 22-mile link, you have to acknowledge the Earth curvature when you're actually doing a point-to-point connect like that, and it's not an easy thing to accomplish. It's pretty impressive.
Yeah. No, it sounds pretty standard. No, I'm kidding. It sounds like that was an edge case.
Those installers, they're to be able to do those shots. That's not easy. I mean, so it takes considerable amount of patience to be able to, especially even if you can see the tower in the distance, to get close and pinpoint, requires a lot.
And a lot of communication.
We're happy with, a lot of dedication. Plus, I'm not climbing down anyone's roof.
Right. But a typical installer, like a typical distance would be what? A couple miles, 3 miles?
4 or 5?
About 4, yeah.
Okay.
6.
We try not to install anyone really past 8, just because of degradation. But there's just sometimes you can't get past that, and they need service.
Yeah. No, that makes sense. Why don't we shift a little bit from 6G stuff to, kind of know you mentioned, Kayla, as well, the impact of Starlink, that's had on kind of the space, and maybe T-Mobile home and other providers as well. Kind of the impact of that stuff.
Yeah, so Starlink is for those in the underserved areas, the very rural areas that even WISP can't get to. It's an amazing product. It really did have an impact on our industry as a whole, because I don't know if you've ever been on Yelp and looked at an ISP. Every ISP is the worst ISP of all time. Every single one.
Not true.
Everyone loves their ISPs. Yeah.
Yeah, everyone loves their ISPs.
No one's getting a Christmas card.
Yeah. I got one.
Did you?
Did you? Wow, that's impressive. Okay.
Yeah. And that's back when I was a tech support manager, so that's why I got it. That was pretty good. Starlink has made an impact. Unfortunately, now for Starlink, with their raising their rates and all the other stuff, that's just people are starting to kind of come back to us. We're a little bit more consistent, and we're local. We're in our communities. So, we tend to get there quicker, and, our support staffs are, very good at making sure people are working. And so we are seeing some customers come back from Starlink, and they'll just use Starlink as a secondary in case of really, really bad storms or power outages, and our stuff goes down. Most of our towers are on significant battery backup, but there's just some that are like solar sites that we have to go deploy a generator once battery backup does fail. So we have customers that are using us in tandem with Starlink.
Yep.
Yeah. So, in my view, Starlink is again a pretty incredible piece of technology. I can't imagine the thousands of little satellites that are up there in space, and obviously gaining a lot of popularity with the prevalence of the Ukrainian-Russian war, right? With Elon Musk supporting all those Ukrainian troops out there, which is pretty near and dear to our hearts. But I do know that there are significant problems with Starlink, right? So first of all, if you're a gamer, and if you just want basic internet and you're like, all right, I'm in this weird location and I need internet as quickly as possible. I don't remember the cost up front, but I want to say it's closer to like $400-$500 or something.
I actually looked this up yesterday. Right now it's 300.
300.
Off of like 500. So they've subtracted 200 off the cost, and I think that's the new minimum.
Got it. So you put this thing up, and then it kind of like does its thing. It's actually kind of cool. I've seen it. So it starts locating satellites. It does it for like a good hour or so. It just starts spinning, and then it locates whatever it does, and all of a sudden you're getting internet. But I've noticed latency is pretty high because it's somewhere between, I want to say, 30 and 40 milliseconds is what I've seen. But I could be wrong. And then I know that if you have an optimal WISP, or if you have a optimal line of sight for all of your radios, WISPs could give you somewhere between 5 and 20 milliseconds. Again, it's how further, how many hops you have, what kind of frequency you're on, all that obviously plays into an effect. But that's the cool thing, like you said, Kyle, right? Is I can call up my local wireless internet service provider and say, listen, I'm a gamer, or I am trading stocks, whatever that may be. I need to get my latency up, and then you guys have this tailored service to potentially change frequencies, whatever it is that you guys have to do, right? There's options. Versus if I am going to a Starlink and there's pros and cons to both. So if I go to Starlink, there's not much that they can do at the end of the day. And from what I understand, the latency may get resolved by adding additional satellites, right? So the more satellites are in space, and the way it works, I think, is you have this like inter-satellite links where one satellite talks to another, and there's this constellation of satellites rotating in orbit. And I think that's how they should be able to reduce latency. But at this point, I think it's realistic number somewhere between like 30 and 40 milliseconds, which is pretty good, but it's not like WISP good in my view.
And for us, even our stub sites, our last line, there's no more access, there's no more sites behind them. Most of those are maybe 3 to 4 hops at most from fiber before they head back to our cores and data centers and out to the internet. So we try to limit the amount of hops that exist between fiber and the end customer.
Of course.
To help with that latency.
100%. So if I said, if I was doing gaming, if I was doing voice over AP, Starlink wouldn't be my first choice. No. For sure.
Yeah. Trying to explain that to a customer can be fun, though. Mm-hmm. They don't understand the concept of your internet's going to space and back. It takes a little bit of time.
Yeah. But the coolness factor, the fact that you got Starlink from Elon Musk, that's, I get it. It everybody kind of runs towards like what's popular and cool these days, right? And again, with it becoming more popular with Elon dedicating a bunch of satellites to the war effort, I think people started to recognize what Starlink is all about, and and to some degree, it's not a bad option. Especially if you need internet quickly, and you don't really care about latency. You just want to browse internet.
Well, because I know it's all about
Go ahead. In the end, it's all about bridging that digital divide. Getting those customers who can't get your Spectrums, your Charters, your AT&T, those customers, or even the WISP, still getting them the ability to have some kind of internet service, because that's how the world operates nowadays.
There's another point that I just realized is bandwidth, or don't they limit you on like how much traffic you can push? I want to say it's like 1 terabyte a month, right?
When I looked yesterday, it all said unlimited.
Did
Um,
it? Did
and
it?
but
Okay.
they don't even say what kind of speeds. They just say it's a flat service for $120 a month, and nothing about speeds. Where we're tiered based on speeds.
Mm-hmm.
So
Mm-hmm.
if you have a person who could probably get a WISP on Starlink who only needs uh, 10 megabits or 20 megabits or whatever, they're paying $120 a month to Starlink for that. Whereas for us, a 25 meg plan, I think it's like 50 or $60. I'm an engineer. I don't need to know those prices for the customers. So
Yeah. I
Right.
I can't imagine. I can't imagine. I have a problem with my Starlink, and I'm gonna call Starlink technical support and be like, "Yeah, we have an office about 5 minutes away, or 5 miles away." Whereas with you guys, it's like, "Oh, hold on a second. Let us take a look. Let's see what we can do. Let us see
yeah,
if we could change the channel on the radios. See if we could change the frequency, whatever it is that we have to do to improve signal quality." So yeah, I
So
absolutely. And yeah, go ahead, Kirill. I'm
yeah,
sorry.
with Starlink, I'm a part of WISP Talk on Facebook, and there are resellers for Starlink at least. So I mean, at least there is a little bit of
Reseller.
help.
mhm.
Yeah,
Okay.
Yeah.
they
Okay.
And
they
it,
purchase the equipment and sell it to the customers.
But are they like first line of defense for those installs? Like, do they have support teams and knock teams and things like that? I'm just curious.
not lock
Support.
teams. Yeah, I know
Okay.
some guys, especially in California, who they'll go set them up, and if customers have issues, they can go on site and do just a quick troubleshoot. But that's local. That's not Starlink affiliated. They're helping where they can because they know what they're
Got
doing.
it. Yeah. Okay. So how like do you guys offer a certain amount of throughput for your end users, and what does that look like? So what's the highest throughput I can get from you guys? 1 gig?
Um, Depending on what you want, I can get you 10.
Yeah.
Yeah.
How much do you
But
want to
let's
pay?
say
It's all about money.
I can get 10 gigabit connection from you guys. Really?
Yep. Yeah.
Can't get that from
It's all
Starlink.
about the money to get it to you. But yeah,
Impressive.
we've got I've got a couple customers upcoming. They're going to get 2 gigabit connections wirelessly. It's going to take, I think, 2 hops to get it to them to do it. But we got customers we can do that for. When you
How do
start
you
talking
guys?
for more than like 300 or 400 megs out of residential, that's where you get into your point to points dedicated links that no one else gets on.
So are you guys doing like microwave um, connections directly to
Yeah, yeah, microwave
your
or unlicensed 60 gigahertz to get those kinds of speeds.
impressive?
Yeah,
Okay, and this is where we're talking, 10 gigahertz. I can get 10 gigahertz. Wow, I did not know that. That's
yeah.
pretty cool.
With some of the big players in the E band, which is the millimeter wave,
Hmm.
Aviat, CI, Ciclu, Cambium. Those are all they have 10 gigabit radios for that are running 80 gigahertz, and we you can honestly couple those together and get 20 gigabits all the way through.
Wow,
Not a cheap
insane.
option though.
No.
Maybe, but again, this is where the differentiation comes in between you guys and Starlink, for example,
Yeah.
is the fact that you guys have those capabilities.
Whereas I just put an order in yesterday for a microwave link, 11 gigahertz. That's 22 miles in Nevada for a 1 gig by 1 gig connection for a geothermal plant,
Wow.
and that's yeah. And right now they're running over an old 11 gigahertz radio that's only capable of 300 megs by I think like 20.
Yeah. Okay. Pretty
Cool.
cool.
Well, why don't we move on? I think the last topic at hand, you had suggested we can move from there. was kind of limitations like how do we not just send trucks out every second of every day. Not that that's what's happening. I'm being somewhat facetious, but
Yeah.
sometimes it feels like it is, right? So let's dive in there.
Yeah, I mean, Kayla and I both working in knock in a previous company. We would deploy 24 hours a day.
Yep.
We
If
we
20
had
plus
limitations
customers,
on, yeah, depending on how many customers were actually affected, depending on if
Mm-hmm.
we called and rudely woke someone up at 2 o'clock in the morning, said, "Hey, guess where you're going?" Or, okay, it's not that, it's X amount of people. We'll wait for the morning and we'll send them tech first thing in the morning because to
uh,
run a truck is anywhere between 100 and almost $200 an hour.
or can
Mm-hmm.
this site be accessed at this time of the day or night,
Mm-hmm.
more likely? I've
Right.
we've had to wait. Uh, I heard of a tower falling over. The company had to rent a helicopter. It was middle of winter.
Mhm.
Couldn't get to it except via helicopter.
Yeah.
Snowmobiles,
So,
what have you, snowshoes in some cases.
Can
Yep,
only imagine
mile.
the cost of all that, right? It eats into everything in terms of the business.
And
It does.
one of the things that fixes 90% of that, reboot.
Mm-hmm.
Router gets locked
really?
up, switch gets locked up, we
The
lose
backhaul
access.
is locked up. Yeah, the
So how do you
radio.
limit truck rolls? Obviously, you want to be able to monitor devices, but I would imagine you also want to understand where the problems occur, right? So like if you have a bunch of devices down, you need to understand where the pain points are on the network because otherwise you're running trucks from one site to another site to another site. So how do you guys mitigate against that?
So we throughout the summer we're doing upgrade projects, but we're also being mindful of winterization. We want to make sure that the tools that we're going to be using through the winter, such as our side by sides with tracks, their servers they're ready to go. Our generators are tip top shape, for when we need to
Sure.
run those. The guys are going out, and especially on like solar sites, they're going out to make sure everything is still good. The cabling isn't weathered, and the solar panels have some hydrophobic solution on them for when it starts snowing, that the snow will just run right off. We're ensuring that the batteries are all up to snuff and that they can hold the charge for X amount of time, or we replace them because we don't want to have to go out there. Not this last winter, but the winter before. So my first winter with Rango, New Year's Eve, bad storm rolled through Nevada, and this is I'd only been with the company like 4 months. I hadn't really been able to set anything in, get the crews up and running to where I believe they should have been. The storm took out a site, and that thing was down for 11 days.
Wow.
48 customers down for 11 days. We couldn't get up there. We didn't have, you know, the winter equipment to get up there. The road was inaccessible. There was 3 feet of snow on there, and it's up a mountain, which dry dirt still takes like 30 minutes to get up there.
Mm-hmm.
So in snow, you can imagine hours.
So what'd you do? Did you just have to wait it out? Wait out the
I
storm?
had to wait till we could get rent a snowcat to get up there,
Mm-hmm.
and kind of find out that there was so much snow that the pole mount for the solar snapped.
Oh,
Wow.
wow. It's too
It,
heavy.
it,
Yeah.
it just snapped, and luckily the radio station that was up there we're on good terms with. They allowed us to just plug into their solar, and we did that, and obviously gave them free internet and new router for their stuff. So,
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Are you
yeah,
are you guys using subcontractors to do the bucket truck work, or you guys have your own trucks and you guys
we
are
have our
doing
own
your own
truck.
truck rolls?
Yeah.
So do you guys have like an idea of how much each truck roll costs the company?
For residential, between $100 and $200 an hour is what that costs. For the infrastructure teams, probably about that, if not a little bit more, depending on if equipment needs to be replaced. If
I know
access
one
points or
solution.
router switches need replaced, yeah, it becomes a little more expensive for the equipment side.
One solution we've been looking into is LTE routers.
Okay.
So,
Yeah.
A cell phone accessible router, so it just runs off cell phone signal plugged into the system, so that we can still access everything on site, and then we can reboot. We have yeah, go ahead.
So these LT routers, we're talking about like Peplink, Cradlepoint, whatever.
Actually, I'm looking at MikroTik's.
MikroTik's, okay.
Yeah.
Sure.
They just use a little SIM card, and as long as you can get cell phone service, you're set. And we have a couple of towers. Go ahead.
Please. Go ahead.
So we have a couple of towers. 3 hours for a tech to drive out there. That's what, about $200-$300 just to drive out there. Whereas if we set up one of these routers, we have a couple that just lock up every so often. Just reboot it and we're done. Moving on with our lives.
Got it. And then are these? So are you guys leveraging somebody else as a ISP for the SIM cards? So you guys are going to like the Verizons, the T-Mobiles, the AT&Ts, you know, to get those SIM cards. Okay.
Yeah,
Interesting.
just whoever has service on the top of that mountain or at that road will utilize them. Data only plans are decently cheap, or even go with like straight talks, where you can just get a straight data only plan.
Is that a common practice right now in the WISP industry to be able to, or no, or is that something you guys are just conjuring up?
I know of a few that do it. I don't know of a lot that do it. I know a few WISPs that have that out of band management system.
Yeah. Okay. Are you using that just for out of band management, or are you using that to say, hey, if we ever drop, you know, a hop, for example, somewhere, we can use the Cradlepoint or the MikroTik or the 4G connection as a backup internet route to at least get our customers some sort of internet capability, or are you just strictly using this for out-of-band management?
Out-of-band management is strictly my point of focus at the moment.
Right.
Just, you know, because if we run those SIM cards, chances are they're not going to last long if, you know, we push customer traffic over them.
Yeah.
Fair
Plus,
enough.
the cost will be ridiculous, probably.
Yeah.
It would be very expensive. Yeah. Makes sense.
When we pay, you know, anywhere from $1,000 to $4,000 a month for the fiber circuit that we push terabits of information through, you can't do that with the SIM card.
I agree.
Yeah.
And then, how many like POP locations do you guys have across United States? Like, how many circuits do you guys currently have across all your customers?
Circuits are like sites, like customer sites.
The site, you're right, customer sites.
So tower sites. I think across all 3 states is probably like 140 sites.
Wow. Impressive. And how many customers?
All in all, across all 3 states is about almost 8,000.
8,000 customers. And then how many support staff do you guys have?
About 7 or 8. I'm not entirely sure on Colorado's build out, but I'm pretty sure on Washington and Nevada's, where that, you know, between those two is 6,000 customers, and that's, what, 5 support staff?
That is impressive. With 5 of you guys managing that many customers. Pretty cool.
And then 2 of us per area for like Nevada and Washington.
for net ops, whereas your standard tech support is like the 5 or 6.
Yeah,
Still,
It's only 4 of us.
that's amazing. And then, of course, I have to say it, but truck rolls can also be reduced by installing network monitoring tools such as IoT Monitor. I have to throw that in there, Chris. Sorry. But yeah,
we'll have to cut that out.
I can plug for you. So yeah, I mean, not only the network monitoring tools to be able to set up specific triggers to say, hey, you got a problem coming on here, look at this, but also you need proper documentation on back end. We don't need to play detective to find out what's on the site, what's actually wrong. Playing detective takes time. Time means downtime, and being the worst ISP in existence again.
Yeah. Another thing I've seen other companies do. We're not quite there yet, but they have their tech support doing what's preventative maintenance for the customers.
Yeah.
So yes, you're still technically creating truck rolls, but it's before it's a problem. So this customer's signal's a negative 74, not good enough for the package that they're on, set up a truck roll to get it read.
Or they're a upper 70 signal, and everyone else on the access points in the 50s or 60s. That 70 is causing that access point to work harder, which brings down everyone else. So you want to send someone out there to either rectify it, or unfortunately sometimes you got to cancel a customer because they're hurting the others.
Sure.
Try not to do
I've heard of that,
but yeah.
I've heard of that. Or maybe put them on a separate link, right? And it was completely separate. Yeah.
We actually just did that for a customer. We're needing to remove a piece of equipment. This customer's been on just about everything in his area, and he's just in that weird spot for everything. He's just shy for 6 gigahertz, but he can't get a good enough signal because of trees and stuff, so we actually put in a point-to-point.
That makes sense.
So it was better because I think it was like negative 70 signal, and so we were able to get him service at least.
Gotcha. Well, I learned a lot.
Well, so did I. There's a lot of acronyms. I'm gonna have to go. No, I'm just kidding. I can fake
just
it.
Chat GPT.
Industry's bad for acronyms. We've all had conversations and nothing but acronyms.
I'm sure. Yeah. I've been in the SaaS world a long time, and we have our own. I just roll my eyes every time. I'm like, oh gosh, we're talking about this again. It's boring to anyone that isn't in the industry. But hey, Kyle and Kayla and Kirill, really appreciate a lot of K's going on here. So, but I really.